Hello, this is Watch It All About with another watch video review. In this review we're looking at the Christopher Ward C3 Malvern Mark II. Obviously it's replaced the Mark I with a much simpler design. Also there's a couple of minor upgrades as well, which we'll discuss later. But for the most of it, it is very similar in design. Obviously the subdials are the same, the numerals are all the same, and the case, apart from it being a millimetre smaller, the only main difference really is the new logo and the lack of texture on the dial. Personally, I prefer this. It's much more modern and classic and a clean look. You can get it in optic white or a charcoaly grey colour, and for this optic white it is a beautifully matte plain white, which I think matches the dress, the classic dress design of the watch really well. So you'll notice that's the main feature of the watch, these applied numerals. We have all the hours applied. We'll look into in greater detail with the macro lens, but I think they're a really nice feature. And when the light catches it, as you can see, they really stand out quite well because they're all polished stainless steel. And then in addition to that, we have polished hands, all of them, and also some nice little extras. So we have this little arrow, 3D arrow pointing to the date window. The date window has a nice chrome border to it as well. And all these hour markers, they're small applied stainless steel battens as well. So it really is quite a well machined, well made watch for the price. It's only £215. Obviously it's Swiss made, but the level of finishing and what you get for it is really quite astounding for the price. I personally really love it, and I think it offers brilliant value for money. So the case itself is very well machined, as you'd expect. Has brushed sides, and then the bezel and the top of the lugs are polished, and the case back is highly polished as well. As you can see there, it's basically a mirror. All the finishing is spot on. You'll notice the lugs have these nice little shoulder edging to them as well to keep it a bit more interesting. But all in all, the case is a very simple design to go with the whole theme of the watch. If we look on the other side, we'll notice we have the crown fully polished, and also the pushers are fully polished as well. So these contrasting finishes give it a nice interesting side, and it really does make it look quite impressive on the wrist. As we move to the case back, as I mentioned, it was highly polished, and we have 7 screws securing it in. It is extremely simple. We have a nice deep CW logo engraved there, and a Swiss made in the serial number below it. But I personally really like the very simple design of the case back, because it matches the general feeling of the watch very well. So I mean, the case, although it's very simple, it is very well made, very well machined. The size of it is 39mm in diameter by 47mm lug to lug, and it's very thin as well. It's only 10.3mm tall, so this means it sits very well under a sleeve, which you'd be pleased to know, because obviously if you're wearing this watch, you'd want to wear it with a nice suit. And because it's only 39mm, I think it's the perfect size for a classy dress watch. I've got a 7.5-inch wrist, and it fits me absolutely perfectly. You know, if you have a 7-inch wrist, it will still fit perfectly as well. But also it will look great on a larger wrist. So that's what it looks like on a wrist. The strap, I've got it on the smallest setting at the moment, and it's just about right for me. So if you do have a smaller wrist, then you're most likely going to have another hole punched in it, which is a bit annoying, but never mind. So looking at it side on, you see the lugs have a nice downturn, so the watch itself hugs the wrist really well. And because the lugs aren't too long, it doesn't make the watch too long on your wrist, so that aids with a comfortable wear, and also it helps it slip under a cuff nicely. The crown isn't too large, poking out the side, which is good, so you're not likely to hurt the back of your wrist by going like that. I can, I've got my wrist really far back and I can only just feel it, so that's good. And these pushes are nicely rounded as well, so they won't cause you any harm or friction, which is good. Okay, so that's the case. If we have a look at the dial again, obviously I mentioned before the applied hour markers, which is in my eyes one of the main features. Above the dial we have the sapphire crystal, which is ever so slightly domed, so if I put it down here you'll see it starts to distort. There we go. So that's a very slight dome on the crystal, but you'll also notice when I get it in some direct light, a nice blue hue. This is one of the things that they've improved on from the Mark 1. The anti-reflective coating on the underside is really, really good, much better. Obviously you can see the blue hue of the anti-reflective coating just there, but it does do a very good job, especially with a white dial, where it can be quite important to have a decent anti-reflective coating. So this is something that they've really impressed me on, actually. They've done a good job on it. So if we move a little bit closer, obviously we'll be able to see it in much greater detail when I get the macro lens on. But something you can't really see is that these subdials have a very slight concentric circle texture pattern to it, which is a really nice touch, because it's not really necessary, because to the naked eye you can't necessarily see it, but when you get up really close you see it's there, and it's a nice little touch, and it shows that they've put lots of thought and effort into it, amongst all these other things that they've demonstrated that they really want to impress with all these little extra bits and bobs. So the printing on it, just plain black ink, which is great. It suits the watch really well, just plain white, plain black, really classic, great for a dress watch. All the printing is spotless, absolutely flawless and very precise, which is a really good thing. So another thing that's impressed me is the strength of the loom on this watch. Usually Christopher Ward's, the loom is nothing to shout home about. It's not the best. But I've actually been really impressed on the C3 Mark II. I think it's actually one of the best loomed Christopher Wards I've seen. It doesn't take very long to charge up. It lasts for quite a while, and it is surprisingly strong. If you have a look on the review, you'll see a picture of a loom shot where you'll be able to see how strong it does glow. So that's another thing that they've improved on, and it has impressed me. So the hands, obviously very, very classic and elegant. I especially like the minute hand and the big second hand, which are very, very thin and very long reaching, basically almost to the end of to the edge of the dial, as you can see. So I think that's really elegant, and it looks great. I'll just start the timer there, which we'll discuss later, but as you can see, the first 30 seconds you also have a tenth of a second indicator, which is a nice little feature, and then when it gets past 30 seconds that will stop, and then that will become your 10-hour indicator. So if we give it 5 more seconds, there we go. So now that will step every half an hour as that one goes around, but we'll discuss the movement in a very short while. So one final point about the dial that I really like is the little extra feature of the date wheel and the date window. Sorry, you'll notice that it's got a very slight surround. It's not just cut out of the dial, very simple, but rather they've beveled the edge and had a chrome surround fitted, which again is a really nice little touch, especially for a watch costing just £215, especially when it's Swiss made. and then this little 3D arrow is lovely as well. It's very well machined and it looks great. Okay, so let's move on to the movement now. One thing that's interesting is that these two subdials here, the minutes indicator and the hours, they don't go around as normal in very slow increments, but rather they do it in more of a step. So every minute, instead of it going slowly around, it'll actually step over to the next minute once that minute is completed. And we'll see that in 12 seconds, but it's the same for the 30 minutes hour indicator. So I'll just wait for that to go. See that just stepped over straight to the next minute, which is quite unusual, but it makes it really easy to read the time actually, which is good. So it's the same for this one. When the subdial minute indicator goes through to 30 and it hits 30, that will then step over to halfway through 10 and 1. And then when it goes through the next 30 minutes, it will step over to 1 hour. So it does keep it nice and easy to read, which is a nice little feature. The movement is a Ronda 5040D, which was used in the Mark 1. So the features of the movement itself aren't any different, but I do think it's a nice movement, and you have a number of features. For instance, you can also press the bottom button whilst it's going to pause it, and then you can press it again for it to catch up to the timing, which is carrying on in the background. There we go. So that's a nice lap timer, and of course you have a tenth of a second indicator there as well. So it is a really good movement actually. It's not necessarily stuff you'd really need on a dress watch, but it is nice to have in any instance. So that's great. Okay, so moving on to the strap. It's 18mm wide lug, and the strap goes from 18mm down to 16mm at the buckle. On this instance, it's a nice black strap, which I think suits the watch perfectly. It's the usual really high quality leather from Christopher Ward, and the standard butterfly clasp, which is excellently made, highly polished, so it matches the rest of the watch well, and is very secure. I've never had one pop open on me yet. So you push it together like so, press those buttons, and that's it secure. Then you press the two tabs again to open it up. So yeah, that's that. It's their usual butterfly clasp and leather strap combo, but it is really high quality, so that's always good. Another nice little feature is these quick release tabs. So this means that you can take the strap off in literally 5 seconds, because all you do is just pull that tab, and then it basically pushes the pin smaller, like so. So you don't need a tool to take the strap off, which is great, which also means that you're less likely to damage your watch changing the straps. So as you can see, just push it back in, and that's it. So it is literally as quick as that to change a strap, which is a great feature, and it's a shame that not more straps have them. So that is a great feature of all Christopher Ward leather watch straps. So it's very soft, very supple leather as well. It's comfortable on the underside, so you know, with the light weight of the watch, it's very comfortable wear, and you can barely notice it's there really. So it is a very comfortable watch, and the strap aids with this fact. Okay, so let's get the macro lens on, and we'll have a much closer look at the C3 Mark II from Christopher Ward. Okay, so let's start at the dial. So there's the printing of the logo. As you can see, it's spot on, very crisp. And we move over here, you can very slightly see the concentric circle pattern on the subdials. Very subtle, but a nice little touch of them. And you can also see that the subdial is on a ever so slightly lower level than the rest of the dial, which again is a nice little feature. something that's not necessarily required, but they've done it anyway to create a tiny amount of texture and depth to the dial, which I really like. So if we move onto the hands, you'll see these are all polished as well with the loomed centers, and the hands are all immaculately made and applied. See a nice reflection there. Look at this one. And then if we have a look at the hour markers, again, exceptionally well made. You can see they're very accurate and applied perfectly as well. So this is it's really impressive. Very nice. And then if we move over to the date window, you see here the little triangular 3D triangle, sorry, and also the polished stainless steel edging around the date window as well, which again is a nice feature that really makes the watch stand out for the price. Okay, so if we move on to the case, you'll notice the side is brushed vertically rather than horizontally, which is a little bit different, but it's a nice touch. And the polished finish of the bezel is spotless as well, very mirror-like. If we move over to the case back, this again is very high quality polish finish, and it's got a nice deep CW logo engraved in the center as well. Very impressively engraved, which is a good thing to, makes you feel like it's high quality. And if we have a look now at the crown, again, everything's spotlessly machined. Can't really fault any of the machining at all. There's a pusher, so if I push it down, has a nice feedback, and it sounds nice when you click it down as well. So the pushers are completely polished. And that's that for the case. So if we move on to the strap now, you'll see we have the little tab there. There's the Christopher Ward logo, and just the general feel of the leather is high quality, is nice and soft. Okay, so if we just move over to the buckle briefly, all the finishing is spotless on this as well. You see the two tabs there which release the main head of the buckle, and then here we go, we have Christopher Ward logo deeply etched in the end as well, which is nice and high quality. Okay, so all in all, I personally love the watch. It's excellent for £215, very high quality, very well machined, it looks great, and as I said before, a little extra features of the good loom and the high quality anti-reflective coating really does make it stand out to the rest of the watches around this price bracket, really, especially being that it's Swiss made. So I highly recommend it for a dress watch, a chronograph dress watch, which is quartz. Just reset the stopwatch. And if you like the look of it, then I highly suggest to go for it, because it is just very exquisite, the dial, and it does make it worthwhile. Okay, so that's what it's all about, and this was the C3 Mark II from Christopher Ward.